Hello out there in Radioland. This is Michael. This is the Street Preacher's Corner podcast, the podcast that occasionally just makes up words. I'll tell you, man, you ever have one of those days where you feel like the universe is conspiring to keep you busy? It has been one of those mornings. I came home from the other thing I had to do, and I was going to get started on this excursion into whatever this is. And I noticed when I uh, had left this morning that one of my daughter's tires was flat. And I said, I'll deal with that when I get back. So I get back, I'm just going to put some air in this tire and, check for obvious issues. And as I'm squatting there on the ground, I was like, I better check all four of these tires while I'm here. And turns out all four of them were low enough where they would not register on the tire gauge. And she was driving around like that because she's a kid and she don't know about things. So her and I have already had a discussion, and I spent about 45 minutes putting air in tires. And here we are. But anyway, and I've got my whole day ahead of me full of things to do. And just like you, man, everybody is just running and running and running. And there'll come a day, I guess. I don't the thing is, God made man to work. Work is not a curse. Man was working. God was the first time you see God in the Bible, God is working. And so God is a God of work, and so he's in favor of you having stuff to do. And when man fell into sin, God gave man even more to do. So I have to assume that God in his wisdom and God in his goodness keeps all this stuff breaking around my place because he knows if I didn't have a constant pile of stuff to do, I'd go get in trouble. That's the only conclusion I can come to. But anyway, that's today. Yeah, last night, let me tell you, before we get started here, let me tell you, last night was a pretty good night. It was a good night. We went to downtown Brunswick to preach during the first Friday festival, which is our habit. And they have this festival the first Friday of every month because they were trying to revitalize downtown. And man, it was wall to wall people. It was a river of people. You would think they were giving away like free Chick-fil-A sandwiches or something. There was so many people. There was a ton of folks, and the crowd just stayed. We stayed later than we normally would have stayed because the crowd was still there. We try to be there stand on the corner by 6:30. We try to be off the corner by 8 because it's quite a commute there for us. Um, it's a 120-mile drive in a circle. By the time I do all the stuff and get back to my house, it's 120 miles, and so a little bit of a commute there. So we tried, but we stayed late. I asked Darnell, I said, "You okay? Your blood sugar doing what it need to do? We're gonna stay for a little while longer because the crowd is still here, and the crowd was thick. Sometimes we start preaching and there's a cluster of people, and then we start preaching and they all leave. Well, this was a steady stream of foot traffic the whole night. And we finally broke camp about 9 o'clock. There were still people out there, and the cops had left, and the vendors had left, and the old car guys had left, and I don't know what they were down there doing, but there was still a mess of people. But anyway, so we're out there, and it's just me and Dee, and there's a guy that we preach with sometimes down there, a guy named Jim Shaw, and he's a local pastor, and I would tell you the name of his church, but I cannot remember it. I think it's Redeemer Presbyterian, I think. Anyway, he's a local pastor, and he comes down there probably 75% of the time that we're there, he's there. And great guy, a very nice man, a very nice preacher. He preaches very kindly and with much grace, and that's a good counterbalance to some of the other things that happen. I'm not a mean preacher. I'm not up there calling people names, but I it is what it is. So to have it, but what is nice about that is people will say, well, the reason you get so much abuse and so much pushback from the community and from the people is because you're a mean jerk. Well, Jim is a nice guy who speaks in a soft voice, and he has the same problem. So, you can make that what you want. Sorry, folks, I had to hit the pause button there. The said daughter showed herself and had to inform her again to keep an eye on the things regarding her vehicle, because if she breaks down on the side of the road, I will come get her, but, I'm going to harass her a little bit about it. But anyway, so we're there, and so Jim shows up, and Jim says, hey, I brought some people with me. And Jim's real good about bringing people with him. They don't usually come back more than once, but he's real good about bringing people with him. So he walks up, he's carrying this mic stand and this big speaker thing, like a little, on a pedestal kind of thing. I don't know what things are called. It's a speaker. And he says, "Hey, this is Kirk, and Kirk's going to play the guitar. Is that okay?" I was like, "Oh man, that's great, man." He says, "Yeah, maybe if Kirk plays the guitar, we can have a crowd gather, and then somebody can preach them." I said, "Yeah, man, I'm for all that, man. Let's do it. Let's give it let's give it a whirl." And so Kirk played really nice, gentle songs. Jesus loves me, this I know, and because He lives, I can face tomorrow, and Amazing Grace. And people stood there, and they nodded their heads, and they smiled, and they whatever. And then the preaching would start, and they just scatter. And but my point is that Jim's a nice guy, and he's a nice preacher, and I don't know why I'm talking so much about him, other than to say that he goes up there and he says nice things and very gentle things, and he gets the exact same reaction we do. He gets hostility. So it's not always the messenger; it is almost always the message. So anyway, so Jim brought this guitar player with him, and the guitar player played, and Jim preached, and I preached, and Darnell preached, and then Jim's son showed up. Younger fella, probably, I don't know, in his 20s, great guy as far as I can tell. And he preached and did a great job. And I think it was his first time. If it wasn't his first time, it was pretty close to his first time. And he did a great job. And so, man, there's a camaraderie-ness. That's not a word. There's a camaraderie. There's a closeness that comes from guys who stand shoulder to shoulder on the field of battle, battling themselves and the world and the flesh and the devil. And so we had a lot of that last night. You say, well, what about the great results? We don't know. We preached to thousands of people last night. I am convinced that thousands of people, thousands as in at least 2,000 people, walked past the signs, heard the preaching. I'm convinced that happened. And so the word of God is not void. It will not go out void, whatever that verse is. And so I'm just trusting God with the results, because that's all you can do. That's all you can do. I'm convinced that there are people, thousands and thousands of people that reject the gospel, that will have to give an account on the great white throne judgment, that they walked past a man trying to give them the gospel. Whether it be me, or whether it be one of the other untold myriad of servants that God has scattered all over this world, people will have to explain themselves. But you didn't come here for all that. At least I don't think you did. You didn't come here to hear some old guy tell a bunch of stories. You came because you were on the edge of your seat about Mark lesson 42. And so let's get into that. And so here we are in Mark 6. We had just finished up Mark 6, Matthew, Mark. Yeah, there we are. Mark 6. We had just finished up in verse. We're going to be in verse 29. And we talked about last time about John the Baptist and his relationship with Herod and how all that thing panned out. And talked a lot about Herod. And Herod, if you haven't heard it, man, go back and listen to it. I think it turned out pretty good. And in verse 29, John is dead. And when the disciples heard of it being the beheading of John the Baptist, they came and took up his corpse and laid it in a tomb. And I think I might have mentioned last time that that's interesting, because that means Herod did not know where John was buried. So when he saw or heard about the disciples doing great wonders, and he wondered if that was John the Baptist rise from the dead, if he knew, like if John was buried in the backyard or something of Herod's palace or something, then he could go out there and make sure the dude's still there. You can't keep a good man down, but sometimes you can. And but because he didn't know where John was buried, when he hears these stories and he's haunted by his guilt, he assumes it's John. And so we covered some of that last time. And the apostles gathered themselves unto Jesus and told him all things, both what they had done and what they had taught. Now we covered last time about how Jesus did not go see John in jail, and and a lot of people will take issue with Jesus about that. I've heard people say, I don't understand why Jesus didn't go see John in jail. Well, I am not one to tell God what he should and should not do, and I'm not one to tell the Son of God how he should spend his time. I do know that the clock is ticking, and the entire ministry of Jesus Christ is go, 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 because the clock is ticking, because the prophecy in Daniel says it's this amount of time from the going forth of the commandment to rebuild Jerusalem to the Messiah being cut off from his people. So the clock is ticking. From the baptism of Jesus till the ministry, the clock is ticking. So he doesn't have time. And honestly, he's had lots of time to talk to John since then. I mean, it's just how it is. Sometimes there are more important things going on than you. Now, Jesus he's not indifferent to the death of John. And my proof of that is that Jesus' overall character is that he's touched with the feeling of our infirmities. And so he cares about your sorrow, and he cares about your grief, and he cares about your pain. But that doesn't mean the universe stops because you have a sad thing happen. And that's just how it is. But my proof that Jesus was not indifferent is his overall character, and we'll see here a little bit. And we'll also see that when John is dead, Jesus decides it's finally time to take a break. I believe he was impacted by the death of John the Baptist, but I believe he also understood that he was there to accomplish the will of the Father, and that means sometimes you don't get to mourn. Sometimes on the battlefield of life, or sometimes the battlefield of a battle, you have a guy die right next to you, a guy you went through training with, a guy you're friends with, a guy you're close as a brother to, and that guy dies, and your job as a soldier is to carry on. And that's how it goes. But anyway, we're gonna look at Matthew 14 in accordance with Mark 6. See if I can do this without breaking something. Matthew 14, verse 12. Bible says his disciples came and took up the body and buried it and went and told Jesus. When Jesus heard of it, he departed thence by ship into a desert place apart. And the people heard thereof, they followed him on foot out of the cities. And Jesus went forth and saw a great multitude and was moved with compassion towards them, and he healed their sick. We're going to come back to that in here in a second. We're going to jump back over to Mark 6 because there's a piece of a sentence here I'm looking for that I know is there. Verse 30, and the apostles gathered, Mark 6, verse 30, and the apostles gathered themselves together unto Jesus and told him all things, both what they had done and what they had taught. Now, this is not John's disciples, because John's disciples are not apostles. You take it off? Yeah. All right, well, be safe, okay? Anything happens, let us know. I thought I hit the pause button there. Oh, well. You got a little behind-the-scenes peek about what goes on at the Street Preacher's Corner in the front yard. Anyway, and the apostles gathered themselves together to Jesus and told him all things, both what they had done and what they had taught. And he said unto them, come ye yourselves apart into a desert place and rest a while. For there were many coming and going, and they had no leisure so much as to eat. So Jesus had sent his disciples out. And this is a different group from he'd sent his apostles out, the 12 apostles. He had sent them out, as you may or may not recall, into the cities of Israel to preach specifically to Jews about the coming Messiah. The Messiah was here, the kingdom of heaven was at hand, and so that's what they did. So they're coming back from that trip, and they're telling Jesus, man, we went and did this and went and did that, and we went to this city and nobody received us, and we went to that city and they loved us, and bam, going through the thing. And according to the Bible, these guys have been so hard at it for so long that they had not even had time to eat. So, like everything else in Jesus' ministry, there's a ton going on. Every minute is full of something going on. And these guys are tired. They're strung out. They haven't even had a chance to eat. And now on top of all that, John the Baptist is dead. And you cannot convince me that did not worry those guys. I mean, it has to occur to you to a certain point that if you've killed John the Baptist, how soon till they kill us? Right? I mean, that's a rational thing to think about. That's a rational conclusion to draw. Is that we are somewhere on Herod's list of people to kill. But also, you're just tired. You've been going and going and going. And you can talk to me all you want about ministry burnout. Let me just get on my high horse for just a minute here. I hear a lot of people talk about burnout in the ministry. I hear a lot of people talk about how, and people say things. They say, if you don't come apart, you're going to come apart. And people say, you got to take a break every once in a while. And maybe that's true. And maybe I am a terribly unbalanced individual. I'm willing to concede that might be the case, but I've gotten tired of fixing lawnmowers. I've gotten tired of repairing the squeaky front gate. I've gotten tired of inflating other people's car tires. I've gotten tired. I've never gotten tired of the ministry. I've been tired in the work, but I've never been tired of the work. And if you were to ask me right now, if I had way less obligations, I would fill that time with more ministry. I would do maybe 2 or 3 of these little podcast things a week. I would go preach someplace for it's. There was been a point in time in my life where I was preaching someplace 4 or 5 times a week, and it was glorious. And yes, it was exhausting, mainly the driving, but it was exhausting. But it was a good tired. And so the people that I hear talk the most about ministry burnout are the people that go to a building 3 times a week and preach to people that already agree with them. And maybe there's more to that ministry than I understand. I've been told more than once that I don't know what I'm talking about as far as that sort of stuff. But I'm just saying, let's say you're right. Let's say you're busy. Let's say between whatever you're doing and whatever you're doing, you're putting in the hours. Let's say that's true. Well, you probably are not as tired as these guys. If you've had time to grab a sandwich, you've had more time than the apostles had. And so Jesus Christ, looking at these fellas, with his compassion on these fellows that he's chosen to be apostles, Jesus looks at these guys and understands that they are wearing out. And so he says, we're going to come apart into a desert place and rest a while. Now, Jesus is not pulling a rope-a-dope. He's not pulling a bait and switch. He fully intends, at least if you take what he says means anything, he fully intends for these guys to take a break. And so they don't travel by land, because when they travel by land, people follow them. So they can get in a boat, and they're going to take off across the Sea of Galilee. It says they departed into a desert place by ship privately. So it's just Jesus, and it's just the 12 apostles. They leave the crowd behind, and they take off across the sea there. And really, you realize that this is the least eventful boat trip that Jesus ever takes. It's like it's from where they go to where they go. It's not very far. It's maybe a couple hours trip or whatever. And at least they get a couple hours to sit around. I don't know if they had food with. Really, you're not given much information about what's going on behind the scenes there. And but you do know that they left these people behind. And it says, the page turned without me looking. And it says, and the people saw them departing, and many knew him, and ran afoot thither out of all the cities, and outwent them, and came together unto him. So when they're going to go someplace, the ship is not the break, right? The desert place is the break. And so Jesus fully intends for these guys to get some downtime. But when they get to where they're going, the people have run on foot. If you look at a map, these places are like 6 or 7 miles apart. The people ran to beat the ship. So when they get there to the next town, the people are already there. The same people they left behind have followed them there, which means these guys do not get a break. Jesus gets no break. The apostles get no break. They have literally left to get a break, and they get no break. So then what? If it was me or you, let's be honest. If it was me or it was you, we would say, hey, man, just give me some space, all right? Look, we haven't had a chance to have a sandwich yet. Would you just calm down? You've been sick for 15 years. You can wait another hour for me to have a sandwich. That's what I would say. You say, well, you're a big mean jerk. Well, maybe. I've never been famous. I'm legendary, but I'm not famous. No, I'm not legendary. I'm famous but unknown. Darnell's the legend. But I think about, like, if I was some kind of famous person, like, I don't know, Weird Al Yankovic or somebody, or Burt Reynolds or something. That's the only people I know who they are. And like everywhere I went, people wanted to talk to me, and everywhere I went, people wanted my autograph. And I could see how um I could see how that would get old. I could see how there'd be times where I'd be all into it, and there'd be times where I'm like, just leave me alone, man. Can't you see I'm eating supper with my family? What's wrong with you? And so, I've only met a handful of famous people, and I've tried to be respectful of all that. But here it is. These guys, they come apart to get their own, they get a break, and they don't get a break, is my point with all that. And so, verse 36, you see, well, hold on, let's back up. So, verse 34, when he came out, saw much people and was moved with compassion towards them, because they were as sheep not having a shepherd, he began to teach them many things. Now, you find out in Mark 14 that they don't do that at the dock. They go a little ways into the mountain and the hillside there, and that's where they have this little session. But my point is that when Jesus gets off the ship, Jesus is as tired as everybody else, right? I mean, it's God manifest in the flesh, but you see where he gets tired. You see where he gets hungry. He has all the limitations of a human body. And so when Jesus gets off the boat, all of a sudden his priority shifts, because it is compassion is part of his nature. Compassion is part of who he is as a person, as an entity, as a being. And so when he gets off the boat, his first priority is not himself and not his apostles. So they go there to get a break, and they go right back into the work. Why? Because the people are more important than you getting a break. The ministry, the gospel going out, is more important than the fact that you're tired or scared or haven't had a sandwich yet. This is the mindset of Jesus Christ. Came to do the Father's will. It's the Father's will that he have compassion. And it says, when it specifically calls out here, it says, because they were as sheep not having a shepherd. When Jesus Christ calls himself the good shepherd, that's not just he's not just talking to hear himself talk. That is part of his nature. That is part of his makeup. That is, he is naturally a shepherd. And so when he sees, my wife, let me tell you guys a story. My wife is the most maternal woman I probably have ever met, with maybe one exception. My wife gives off such maternal vibes that little chickens and baby ducks recognize that she's a mom and follow her around the yard. It's funny. Like, they just see me and like, oh, some dude. Oh, it's the dude with the bread. Yeah, we like him because he's got bread. But they'll follow her around the yard. Puppies, kittens, they all just gravitate towards my wife. So she's got this. My daughter watches this little baby sometimes. Babysits this baby, and she brings the baby to our house. And so, she's like, "Here, mom, hold this baby," and my wife will take that baby, and she will. The second she's got that baby in her arms, like, the baby just like, oh, this is what we're doing now, and that baby will, its entire countenance changes, because somehow instinctively it knows that it is in the hands of a mother, of an experienced mother, and it is in the safest place in the world, because that's not even her kid, but my wife would kill you before she let something happen to that baby. And men are protective, but men are not women, and men are not mothers. And so my point, I guess, is that just like it is in my wife's nature, she automatically mothers anything that needs to be mothered, whether it's a person or a duck. Jesus is automatically a shepherd. He shepherds anything that needs shepherding. And the Bible says that he looked upon them with compassion, because they were as sheep not having a shepherd. He began to teach them many things. And now when the day was far spent, so that the morning has come, they've got on the boat, the afternoon has come, and now it's almost dark. His disciples came to him and said, "This is a desert place, and now the time is far past. Send them away, that they may go to the country round about, and in the village, and buy themselves bread, for they have nothing to eat." And so, it's about dark, and they still haven't had a break, and the disciples are less concerned than Jesus, but they are full of ideas. They're full of suggestions. They know exactly what should be done in the situation. They're telling Jesus, what you need to do, Jesus, is you need to send these folks down the road, because we don't have, they need to get some food. And I'm not casting aspersions at the disciples for this, because I have certainly told the Lord what I thought should happen next in this circumstance in my life. And say, Lord, listen, here's what needs to happen. When truth be told, I have no idea what's supposed to happen next. And from a strictly human standpoint, though, now I don't want to be hard on these guys, but from a strictly human standpoint, their idea makes total sense because they're looking at the circumstances. They're saying, we cannot feed them, so send them away. And in verse 37, Jesus says, he answered and said to them, give you them to eat. Now, they had just told Jesus, we have no food. And Jesus said, okay, give them food. And so, I get it because I'm a person, right? And I know how the story turns out. But I'm also a person, and I can imagine standing there and looking at the situation going, Jesus, were you not listening? We just told you we don't have any food. When you go to the account in John or in Mark, let's jump over there real quick. I'm sorry, that was Mark. Matthew, you get a little more detail. Maybe it's Matthew, maybe it might be John, about who said what. Let's see if I can find this. Verse 15, when it was evening, his disciples came to him saying, this is a desert place. The time is now past. Send the multitude away. This is not where he tells them. There's a place in there where it says that Philip was doing most of the talking, is where I'm going with that. And maybe we'll find it here in a second. It might be my notes someplace else. But Jesus, when Jesus, they say, we don't have any food. And Jesus says, great, give them some food. And their response is almost like, no, were you not listening, Jesus? There is no food. Now let's take a little side trip, okay? And we're going to go to Exodus 16. Because obviously, if you spent more than 5 minutes reading your Bible, you know where this is going. You know that Jesus is about to supernaturally feed these people. This is what they call the miracle of the loaves and the fishes, right? And so, but there's a significance to this parable. There's a significance to this miracle that I don't think a lot of people catch. So, Exodus 16. And they took their journey from Elim, and all the congregation of the children of Israel came into the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after their departing out of the land of Egypt. And the whole congregation of the children of Israel murmured against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the children of Israel said to them, would to God we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the flesh pots, and when we did eat bread to the full, for you have brought us forth into the wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. Then the Lord said unto Moses, behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a certain rate every day, that I may prove them whether they will walk in my law or no. Okay? Now, this is the Exodus. This is the children of Israel have left Egypt, and they are journeying through the wilderness, and man, there are lots of directions to go from here. Okay, so they're in the wilderness, and God announces that he is going to feed them supernaturally with bread in the morning and flesh in the evening. You see that a little bit later on in the chapter, okay? In verse 13. And it came to pass that even the quails came up and covered the camp, and in the morning the dew lay round about the host. And when the dew that lay was gone up, behold, upon the face of the wilderness there lay a small round thing, as small as the hoarfrost on the ground. And when the children of Israel saw it, they said one to another, it is manna. Now, manna is a word that means, what is it? So the stuff they didn't have a name for, they called it, what is it? It is manna, for they wist not what it was. And Moses said to them, this is the bread which the Lord hath given you to eat. Okay? So there's that. Now, let me just confess something here. So I recently found something out that I'd wondered about for years, and God finally showed it to me. I used to wonder why the children of Israel were always complaining about how hungry they were and how they didn't have anything to eat. Because according to Exodus 17, verse 3, the people there thirsted there for water, and the people murmured against Moses, said, wherefore is this that thou hast brought us up out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our cattle with thirst? So we know that when the Jews left Egypt, they took their cattle with them. And I'm always like, why are you complaining you don't have any meat when you brought cattle with you? It always bothered me. They always complaining. But this is what God showed me. Numbers 11. Numbers 11. You're like, yes, this is a side quest on top of a side quest. Numbers 11. I always was like, man, these guys always complain about that they don't have any food, but there's food walking next to them. I don't understand. So number 11. Let's see here. Where do we start here? And Moses said, verse 21, Moses said, the people among whom I am are 600,000 footmen. So whatever the population of the children of Israel is, leaving. I've heard it's up to 2 million people. I don't know how you get those numbers, but we know there's at least 600,000 soldiers, footmen, guys that are, combat ready, military age. And now I said, I will give them flesh that they may eat a whole month. Shall the flocks and the herds be slain for them to suffice them? Or shall all the fish of the sea be gathered together for them to suffice them? So the piece of the puzzle that I was missing was that they had taken cattle with them out of Egypt, but they hadn't taken like a lot of cattle. They had taken basically a breeding stock because they weren't planning on, parking in the wilderness. Right? I mean, they weren't. That wasn't the plan. The plan was leave Egypt, go to the promised land. And so what they took, so you can't eat your breeding stock. You're waiting until you get to the promised land, and then you're going to let everything make babies like crazy, and you're going to have these big herds. But what you have is like a starter kit for a herd. And there's too many people for you to kill all the cows and eat them. Okay? So it's really, and I don't know why I missed that for so long. And I'd ask people, like, why were they always complaining about, not having any food when they have food with them? People are like, I don't know. Well, that's why. So apparently the cattle they left with, they weren't enough to eat on a regular basis. So I guess the plan is once you get to the promised land, you let the herds grow. And so until you get to the promised land, you have to keep the breeding stock. So God feeds them supernaturally for the next 40 years or so because of their disobedience and because they had to, do circles in the wilderness. But we need to talk about the geography here for a second. Actually, we got to talk about these two things about the manna. So my side quest has a side quest, and the side quest has his own side quest. Look at Psalm 74. We're just going to talk about two things real quick about manna. I'm going to read the verses. I probably won't offer a whole lot of commentary because it's too weird and I don't know what we're talking about. 74. Psalm 74. Where's this verse at? Verse 12. For God is my king of old, working salvation in the midst of the earth. Thou didst divide the sea by thy strength. Thou breakest the heads, plural, of the dragons, plural, in the waters, plural. Okay. Thou breakest the heads of Leviathan, singular, in pieces, and gavest him to be meat to the people inhabiting the wilderness. There is apparently, if you believe like I believe, that the plurals and the singulars in your Bible are as significant and as inspired as anything else in your Bible, then you have to concede that there is a multi-headed creature called Leviathan that God broke its heads and gave the children of Israel that meat from the head of Leviathan to feed them in the wilderness. You say, that's just weird. Oh, wait a minute here. Psalm 78. Verse 22. Verse 21. Therefore the Lord heard this and was wroth, so a fire was kindled against Jacob, and anger also came up against Israel, because they believed not in God and trusted not in his salvation, though he had commanded the clouds from above and opened the doors of heaven and had rained down manna upon them to eat and had given them of the corn of heaven. Man did eat angels' food. He sent them meat to the full. So the manna, they're getting actual meat. There's a quail thing that happens. They're getting actual meat. But the manna is also called meat. This bread is also, apparently it can be categorized as meat. And apparently it's the head of Leviathan. You say, what in the world is that? Don't know. So now that I've scratched that itch, now we got to talk about the geography. We're going to get back to Mark 6, I promise you. Okay, so when the children of Israel leave Egypt, if you got a map in front of you, great. If you don't, just picture this in your mind. So Egypt is on one side of your map on the left-hand side. The land of Israel is on the other side of the map on the right-hand side. They leave Egypt, and they go east towards Israel, towards the land of Israel. And obviously they do circles in the desert for a while, but in a very general sense, they are moving east the entire time. So they go east, they go around the bottom of the Dead Sea, and they hang a left and go north for a while, and then they hang another left, and now they're facing west, and they're on the other side of the Jordan River. The Jordan River runs, you have the Sea of Galilee at the top, you have the Dead Sea at the bottom. Jordan River runs north to south between the two. So they are standing on the east side of the Jordan River looking west into the Promised Land in the book of Joshua before they cross over. That entire area from the basically the Nile River to up on all around, curving around the bottom of the Dead Sea, going north, and then turning back around towards the Jordan River. That entire side, that entire area is called the wilderness. And you can run the references. The wilderness has a definite geographic boundary, and the boundary is the River Jordan. You cross the River Jordan, you're no longer in the wilderness. If you're on the east side of Galilee, you're no, or I'm sorry, you cross the Jordan River, you're no longer in the wilderness. You're crossing over into the land of Israel. And God stopped feeding them with manna after they crossed that river, because they were walking into a situation where there were houses that already there, and there were gardens planted, and there were fields there, and there were cattle there that God gave to them from the previous inhabitants there that had been run out. Okay. So my point is that whole wilderness on the right hand side of your map there is called the wilderness. Now there's lots of reasons why that is, and you get into there's some tribes over there and great whatever greater. But the point is that's the area of if God is going to supernaturally feed someone, that's the area where he's going to do it. He's not going to do it once you cross Jordan River, because that's just not what he does. That's the boundary of the manna, is the Jordan River. So, okay. So they leave Egypt, they head east, they go around the bottom of the Dead Sea, get up past the Dead Sea, turn north, they go north for a little bit, they turn west, so the River Jordan is right there in front of them, and that whole area east of the Jordan is called the wilderness. It's called that consistently, okay? So when Jesus gets in the boat, and he crosses Galilee, that far bank where he lands, where all this event here in Mark 6 is happening, that far bank right there is part of the wilderness. Okay? Now, every time in your Bible that God feeds Israel supernaturally, it is in the area called the wilderness. He did it in the past, he did it here, and he does it in the future. Look at Revelation 12. Revelation 12 is in the back of my Bible, probably. It was last time I saw it. Revelation 12. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. You can run the cross reference on that back to Genesis 37 to Joseph's dream, and you can figure out that is the nation of Israel that we're talking about. And the verse 6, and the woman fled into the wilderness, where she had a place prepared for her of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. So there's an event in the future where God feeds the children of Israel, the physical descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He feeds them again in the wilderness. Look at Micah 7. It's in your Old Testament. I always have a hard time finding it myself. Not Malachi, although they're spelled very, very, very similarly. Yeah. Micah 7, verse 14. Feed thy people with thy rod, the flock of thine heritage, which dwell solitarily in the wood, in the midst of Carmel. Let them feed in Bashan and Gilead, as in the days of old. So God revisits this idea of feeding the people supernaturally, okay? So that's fine, that's whatever. No, but what I'm trying to tell you is that all this is just prep for what happens next. When Jesus Christ says, okay, we're going to give them food to eat, and they say, we don't have any food. He goes, what food do we have? And he spiritually, supernaturally manifests bread and flesh to feed Israelites with on the far side of Jordan, what he is doing is he is claiming deity. That is a function of God. That is a function of Jehovah Shalom, Jehovah Jireh, the God of Israel. There's a reason this every time you can we're going to cover it again before it's over with, but every time Jesus does this, it's in the same area. It's in the wilderness. That is not just, oh well, the people are hungry and I fed them. This is all set up, man. This is all okay. Anyway, so just get that in your brain that this is not just a miracle. This is a claim to deity. Jesus is doing the thing that God had done in the past and that God is going to do in the future, and he does it in the same area that God did it in the past and is going to do it in the future, okay? Just get that in your head. Now, but Mark 6 again, verse 37, he answered and said to them, give ye them to eat. And they say unto him, shall we go and buy 200 pennyworth of bread and give them to eat? And he said to them, how many loaves have ye? Go and see. And when they knew, they say 5 and 2 fishes. So we're going to pick up Matthew 14. Maybe it's in Luke where you get all the inside scoop on who was saying what. Matthew 14. Come on, man. Come on. Here we are. Let's see. But Jesus said to them, they need not depart. Give ye them to eat. They said to him, we have here but 5 loaves and 2 fishes. And he said, bring them hither to me. Okay, so that's how. Look at Luke 9. Luke 9. Let's get through this. Verse 12, I think it is. And when the day began to wear away, that's a great phrase. The day wears away. So do the people that are in the day. But anyway, and then came the 12 and send the multitude away. They may go into the towns and country round about and lodge and get victuals, for we are here in a desert place. By the way, victuals is a southern derivative of the word victuals. Just, But he said to them, give ye them to eat. And they said, we have no more but 5 loaves and 2 fishes, except we should go and buy meat for all this people. And there were about 5,000 men. And he said to the disciples, make them sit down by 50s in a company. And they did so, made them all sit down. He took the 5 loaves and 2 fishes, and looking up to heaven, he blessed them and brake and gave the disciples to set before the multitude. And they did eat and were all filled. And I gotta find the passage in John too, because I'm missing a piece here. I'm missing a piece all there. John 6. And they're all taken to the fragments that remained out of the 12 baskets. Let's look at John 6. This is recorded in all the Gospels, apparently. Jesus went to the mountain, and there sat with his disciples, and the Passover, a feast of the Jews, was nigh. Now, I've always thought it was kind of strange that he specifically called out in a book, written by a Jew, that the Passover, quote, a feast of the Jews was nigh, unless John understood that he was going to be writing to a mostly Gentile audience. And he said this to Philip answered him, verse 7, 200 pennyworth of bread is not sufficient for them, for that every one may take a little. And one of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said unto him, there is a lad here which hath 5 barley loaves and 2 small fishes, but what are they among so many? And Jesus said, make the men sit down. Now there was much grass in the place. So the men sat down in number about 5,000. So it says over another place, 5,000 plus the women and children. So we're talking probably 7,000 people, 8,000 people, something like that. Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed to the disciples, and the disciples of them that were sat down, and likewise the fishes as much as they would. And when they were filled, he said unto the disciples, gather up the fragments that remain, that nothing be lost. So there's something to that phrase. And I don't know, there's something there. Like why would Jesus be concerned that the fragments be gathered up? I'm talking, pieces of bread and pieces of fish gathered up. It's very strange, and there's something there. And I've been asking God for years to show me what that is, but He hasn't yet. So I'm just gonna put it out there. Therefore they gathered them together and filled 12 baskets with the fragments of the 5 barley loaves, which remained over and above unto them that had eaten. Now, to me, the real miracle is not that Jesus did this thing with the loaves and the fishes. The real miracle is to me, where'd the baskets come from? I mean, were there people just carrying empty baskets around? I don't know. But somehow they filled up 12 baskets full of stuff. Now, what happens next is also very interesting, at least to me. Um, so after everyone is eaten, after they'd gathered up the fragments that remain, let's go to Mark 6 again, about verse 40 something. Maybe. Yeah. 40 something. And straightway, verse 45, and straightway he constrained his disciples to get into the ship and go to the other side before into Bethsaida, which while he sent away the people. And when he sent them away, he departed into a mountain to pray. So let me just say this. So the disciples get on the ship and the disciples leave, and Jesus stays behind. Jesus stays behind because Jesus Christ is a great warrior and the captain of our salvation. And a great warrior who leads men into battle, and a great warrior will be the first one to set foot on the field of battle and the last one to step off. You see, Mike, you're making too much of that. Well, that I'm making too much of it. But I look at that and I see a great commander sending his troops away, and he deals with the aftermath of what's going on. So he sends those people away, and so we know that he sends people away, but John 6 tells us why he sent them away. And this is crucial, okay? Remember what just happened. He just supernaturally fed them with bread and with flesh in the wilderness. And somebody there figured out what that meant. Then those men which had seen the miracle that Jesus did said, this is in John 6, verse 14, then those men, when they had seen the miracle that Jesus did, said, this is of a truth that prophet that should come into the world. So what in the world are they talking about? Well, Deuteronomy 18, Moses makes the people a promise. And verse 15, the Lord thy God will raise up unto thee a prophet from the midst of thee, of thy brethren, like unto me, unto him ye shall hearken. Well, it turns out they didn't hearken to him at all, but you know what? You can't expect everything. So Moses had said, hey, God's going to send you a prophet like me, and there are so many similarities between the life of Jesus Christ and the life of Moses that people should have figured it out. Well, these guys figured it out. They figured, hey, this guy just fed us with manna and meat in the wilderness like Moses did. This is the guy that Moses said was going to come, that was going to be like Moses. Well, you know what that means? That if the prophet of Deuteronomy 18 is here, that means the king of Isaiah 9 is here. Our king has arrived. Right? And these guys are living under Roman oppression, and they're thinking, man, the king is here. God is with us. God is with Emmanuel. Emmanuel meaning God is among us, right? It's one of Jesus Christ's titles. And so the people that knew that stuff, they said, oh my goodness, could you hear this thing that's been promised for thousands of years is happening now. And the Bible says, and when Jesus perceived that they would come and take him and make him by force to make him a king, he departed again into a mountain himself alone. So something about this miracle makes people think about Deuteronomy 18, which makes them think about Isaiah 9. And they want a king. They want to be the head, not the tail. They want to be the rule of the nations. They want God to come and rule over them like he did in the days of old. And they're not getting it. They're not getting it right now because there are other things that have to happen first. And you can say if the people had received him, he would have set up his kingdom right then and there. I don't believe that's true because Isaiah 53 is still in the Bible. And if he goes, okay, yep, you figured it out, I'm the king. I'm gonna go ahead and set myself up on the throne of David in Jerusalem. Follow me to the palace. If he had done that right then and there, then when does he go to the cross? I mean, people are still dying in their sins and going to hell. When does he go to the cross? When does Psalm 22 happen? And when does Isaiah 53 happen? So I think he left there to keep himself from becoming king so that he go to a cross. So when the Bible talks about the joy, for the joy that was set before him, he endured the cross. Part of that joy is being king over his people. You can't get around that. So like I said, their reaction. Here's a king that can defeat our enemies and will feed us. Their reaction makes a lot more sense, except there's a bigger plan at work. Isaiah 53 is still on the schedule, and the scripture cannot be broken. So Jesus leaves. And he leaves and he goes into a mountain to pray all by himself. There's only a handful of times during Jesus' ministry where he's alone. And this is one of them. And we have no idea when he prayed. We have no idea of anybody else he ran into. He goes and gets away from everybody. And he sends the disciples in a boat to Bethsaida. And he does not tell them how he's going to. He says, I'll meet you there later. He does not tell them how he's going to get there. And he goes off by himself to pray. And that is where we will stop, because you know what happens next. Jesus walks on water. I mean, you got to get back to Bethsaida somehow. Sent the guys away in a boat, for crying out loud. Well, thank you for listening, all four of you. This has been the Street Preacher's Corner podcast. Seriously, I don't take it lightly that anyone listens. I don't obsess about the numbers. I really don't. But I'm amazed. In all the busyness of this world, I thank you for taking the time to listen to this knucklehead go through the Bible. I appreciate it more than you know. Well, thank you for listening, and like I said, I'll see you on the other side.